These are 12 by 12 dry wax deli sheet or sandwich wrap, as the package says. I got them online from Sam's Club. There are several different brands, and I actually contacted an artist that I've been following and asked her specifically for some recommendations for brands. There's 1,000 sheets in here, and she just said don't pay more than $5 or $10 for 1,000 sheets. So if you're finding something that's much more expensive than that, keep looking, or you may want to pay a little more just to not have to store 1,000 sheets. I had shown this technique in August, and so we're going to use it again for a stamped wreath, and that way we don't have to treat our page. We can stamp on this, just glue it in, and we're done. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the template for my size Bible page, and I'm going to trace around it and cut it out. So I've cut this out, and now the next thing I'm going to do to prepare is I'm going to lay it over the page where I want to be adding my stamps and get it basically lined up on the page. I can see the words through the deli paper, so I'm going to just kind of give a little outline of where those words are, and I'm going to go as close to the words as I can, because I can cut really close to that, or I can cut farther into the page and cut my pencil lines off. Just I don't want to stamp where words are going to be. So now I'm going to set the Bible aside, and we're just going to work on the paper. For stamping today, I'm going to be using a stamping mat. This just helps give a little cushion under your paper so that when you press down, you get a complete image of what you're stamping. If you don't have stamping mat, you can use a stack of a few magazines. If you're stamping directly in your Bible, this usually isn't an issue unless you're close to one end of the Bible or the other, because the pages stacked together in the bound book are usually enough to give you that soft area. For my stamping ink, I'm going to actually be using my watercolor brush markers instead of stamp pads. My colored stamp pads are either distress inks, and I don't have a wide variety of colors, or I have pigment ink, which takes a very long time to dry or needs to be embossed, and I didn't want to have to go through those extra steps. So I'm actually just going to use the brush markers, go ahead and color directly on the stamp, and then use it as my stamping ink. So some of the stamps that I'm going to be using today are this cute little owl that somebody donated, and that's a Michael's Recollection stamp. And then I have this older set with some fall leaves and acorns. And this is a Stampin' Up set. I have a sunflower, and I have this sunflower, and then I have some sunflower leaves. Probably going to use some or all of those for our stamping today. I want to remember to leave a little space for my writing or anticipate using lighter colors where I want to write so that I can write over them and it'll be seen. The verse that I'm doing for this is Hosea 14:9, and it says, "Whoever is wise, let him understand these things. Whoever is discerning, let him know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the upright walk in them, but the transgressors stumble in them." I usually like to look it up in a couple different versions and see what speaks to me most clearly, and then I will write that in when I do my hand lettering. The next thing I'm going to do, set these stamps aside, is find my bowl again so that I can mark this. And you can use a paper plate, and I'm just going to mark this again, like I've said before, really lightly, so that after I do my stamping, it's not really that visible. So sorry if you can't see it on the video, but you kind of have an idea of where I did it. So I'm going to start with my sunflower because it's going to take up a lot of space, and you'll be able to see that I'm just coloring directly on the stamp, and I'm going to do this yellow orange color near the center, and then I'm gonna do the lighter yellow on the petals. And they'll sort of blend hopefully in the center of the petal. And then right before I stamp it, I want to just give it a little hot breath, and that kind of reactivates any ink that's drying. And then I'm going to stamp it. Even pressure, try not to rock it. And there we have our first little light stamp. So I'm going to go ahead and do another one with darker orange in the center and then the lighter yellow orange on the outside edge. And before I do that, let me get a post-it note. So this technique that I'm going to show you right now real quickly, I'll fast forward through the process, is called masking. And it's so you can get a layered look with your stamps. You could really use any color to do this, but since I don't want to clean my stamp between, I'll just do what I'm going to be using when I stamp on the page next. So I'm going to stamp on the post-it note, and then I'm going to quickly just cut out along the outside edge, not the middle. There you have it. When you cut one of these out, I usually will save it in the box with the stamps so that I can use it again. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to cover up our first stamp using this. So I'm going to have to turn it till it matches up. There we go. So we're covering up our original stamp, and then I'm going to re-ink this and stamp over the mask. So part of the ink will go onto the mask, and then it'll look like the flower I'm stamping now, second, is actually under the flower that's on the page. Okay, on, give it a little hot air, and then we will stamp again. I'm going to turn it so it's not exactly the same as the last time. So hopefully you can see that it gives kind of a two-dimensional look to that. The other thing I can do is only color part of the stamp if I want only a piece of it. I'm just going to do this one leaf. I use my mask again. And I'll stamp this guy down in this corner. So now the little leaf is under as well. And I'll probably do another one over here. Now the watercolor markers probably don't give as defined a edge or as clear an imprint as a pigment pad or a ink pad would, because they're watercolor, and so you do kind of get that, you know, watercolory sort of vague look. So if you don't like that, you might want to invest in some colored inks. Okay, so we've got this bottom edge started, and then I think I'm going to do some fall leaves up along that edge, put my little owl in, and then come back and do hand lettering. The nice thing about the brush markers is that you can mix the colors, and if it gets on the tip of one marker, you just scribble on paper until it's clean again. You can also actually touch tip to tip to blend color and then put it down, or you can blend, especially on this rubber surface, you can just blend on the surface of the stamp. You'll notice that I'm using the edge of my brush, not straight down on the tip, because I want to preserve those tips for doing brush lettering. You want to make sure when you're coloring that you're getting all the way to the edge of the stamp. I'm actually going to clean off the one acorn and do similar to what I did with the leaves and only stamp the one acorn. So I want to make sure all the ink is off the other one. And this sunflower stamp probably had another stamp inside to give it the middle. Since I bought that at a thrift store, it was missing part of the kit. I am going to go ahead and erase my pencil line where it's not covered by ink, and then I'm just going to color in the centers of these sunflowers. Now I'm going to go ahead and stamp my owl. I'm actually going to use StazOn ink for him because I want to be able to add a little color to him, and if I use the watercolor brush marker, then when I color with the watercolor brush marker on it, the watercolor brush markers reactivate with water, and so it will smear. So you want to use a waterproof ink when you're going to be coloring in the stamp and not actually just stamping in one or more colors. So the watercolor brush markers, if you put them on light like this, they don't bleed through. But they do bleed if you're coloring with them and you go over the same spot more than once. And if I was doing this on a regular Bible page, and Bible pages aren't much thicker than our deli paper, and I do something in watercolor on the back of the sheet without treating, the color from the other side will soak into the water from the watercolor on the back side of the page, and it will bleed through the page. And so that's why the deli paper is kind of nice. If you are not wanting to take the time to use a gesso or a matte gel medium to prep your pages, then the deli sheets are very inexpensive, and they're a very good option for using any medium that's going to bleed through. Most of your watercolor or permanent inks are going to bleed through the page. The StazOn ink bleeds, and I have one pad that's very inky and one that's not, so I'll have to see which one I have here. I think this is the not very inky. StazOn ink pads dry out very quickly. They have this little, they come with this little plastic extra cover to keep the moisture in, and I just took a little glue dot and stuck it inside the other cover so that I don't lose it. Let's see if this is the one that's got more ink. Yes. So normally I would do this on the table, but I'm shaking my camera if I do that. So I'm just gonna have to tap it several times to get enough ink on it this way. And then I'm gonna get my cover back on quickly because it's a solvent-based ink and it dries very quickly. So I think I'll put my little owl, let's see, down here, up there, maybe here, sitting on my sunflower. The StazOn ink, if you really are wanting your stamps to come clean again, you have to use an actual StazOn cleaner, and you can use a cleaning pad like this, or you can just put it on a rag or a paper towel and clean off your stamps. There's a lot of different philosophy out there about leaving some ink on your stamps thinking it inks better the next time around versus keeping them clean. I haven't quite joined either camp. Sometimes I clean them, sometimes I don't. The watercolor ink, however, is very easy to clean with just a baby wipe or regular stamp cleaner. I know that another thought with stamps is just wanting to preserve the rubber and have it not dry out. And so if you're using a cleaner with alcohol in it, it can dry out your rubber and then damage the quality of your stamps down the road. So another reason maybe not to clean them, or to use a baby wipe that doesn't have alcohol in it, or just water. So now I can do a little coloring in my owl, and I'll probably give him some feet. And as long as the StazOn ink is completely dry when you start coloring, it should be completely waterproof. And since I don't want it to be, the owl is fine, I wanted him solid, but I don't want these centers to look different than the outside edge. So you can see the watercolor markers activate very nicely with water. So I just colored a little on there, and then I'm just using a plain wet paintbrush, no paint on it, to pull the color around so that it has a similar watercolory look to the stamped image. And I wanted some little white spots in the center, so that's why I went ahead and kind of marked where those would be so that I don't paint in that area. So I want to just use a very little bit of water so that I'm not running into the other areas of color on here, because it will cause it to also reactivate and bleed into this color. Now I can do my hand lettering, and then I'll be trimming this down, and then I'll come back and show you how we're going to glue it in on the page. So now I'm just going to cut around, not right on the edge of the design, but just a little bit away from it. And I'm going to cut off my pencil lines, and then I'll show you how it's going to fit on the page and how we glue it in. Someone taught me a long time ago when crafting and cutting to try and hold your scissors still and turn your paper. And then the other thing with cutting these deli pages to glue them in, the smoother the lines, I think, on the edge, the easier it is to glue it down without folding over little tips. So you can see now that it's going to line up right in that little crevice and then on the page around the words. You can use a mono glue or you can use a glue stick with the archival property, and you really want to make sure you get the edges done well. As we're laying it down, eyeball where it's going to go and either lay it from one edge and move across or from the center and move out to both sides, depending on how precise you're having to lay it. Go ahead and take my scrap paper and just use it to protect my page as I'm getting the glue on this. And you'll see it starts wanting to roll as soon as it gets glue on it, which is why I need that other paper underneath so I don't get glue where I don't want it on my Bible page, and every little piece of dirt sticks to it down the road when or paint or. So now I'm going to hold it so it doesn't roll up. Fold it down in this crack and across this bottom piece. And because I have to get the top and the bottom aligned, I'm probably going to just go from this one side and then move up rather than the center. If I wasn't having to get the edges so perfectly, I would probably go from the center more. Using any water-based mediums in the Bible, your pages tend to get crinkly. I actually kind of like the texture. If having the page perfectly smooth, you're OCD about that, maybe the deli paper is not the best thing for you, because they do tend to be a little bit crinkly even after you smooth it out. You have to be slow about how you lay it down. And I'm just coming back in right now, and where I didn't work quickly enough, it already started drying on the edge. And I really even could, if I wanted to, I could dedicate a little tiny paintbrush to gluing. You know, you wouldn't want to try and get it perfectly clean to paint with it again, but I could use the mono glue. So you could take a little paintbrush like this and put glue on it and slide it under those edges if you feel like they're not down well enough. And with the glue, the deli paper almost sort of melts into the Bible page, and so you almost have to look closely once it's really well adhered to know that it wasn't done directly on the page. I really think with the extra layer of paper behind it, when I do something on this other page, it's not likely going to bleed through from this medium through 2 pages. So that's a partial wreath. I love the way it acts as a frame for the page.